You're listening to the God Life Culture Podcast, where faith
and what's trending collide. Welcome back to the latest episode of the God Life Culture Podcast. This is Eddie.
What's up, everyone? This is Miguel, and we are so excited that you are back for another episode of the God Life Culture Podcast. We want you to take this moment right now to hit that subscribe button if you are not subscribed so you can be notified every time we drop a new episode. To all of you who are watching on YouTube or you're watching the visual, we want you to hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Be sure to like the video, comment, share, do all of the things that you should do.
Yes.
Eddie, how are you feeling today?
You know what? Today's been an interesting day. It's like one of those days where work is going crazy. You got to rush here to get this done. Then you have 300 other things you need to get done once this we're done recording as well. But overall, listen, it sounds very cheesy every time I say it, but at the end of the day, it is the truth. I'm good. I'm fine. You know what I mean? Everything, all the big stuff are rolling in the right direction. So who am I to complain about the little things? How are you doing?
Yeah, I definitely hear you on just being on the go. I think it's just funny because every time, we plan days when we're going to record and we kind of like schedule it out. But there are always like those unexpected things that happen.
Yeah.
And it just feels like every time we choose to record that day, it's just like back-to-back things happening. But it felt really good to come here, right, and be in this space. Like many of you guys know, last week we released our first episode for this season, and we introduced the new visuals that many of you guys saw. It's up on YouTube and our Instagram Reels and all those things, and our new pod space that we're recording in. So again, it feels great to just have this stability and be able to come to this space, and I think it definitely helps. Right. And just the craziness of the day to then be able to come here to do what we like to do and love to do in this space. So that's definitely awesome.
I think what the good thing is that usually, and we touched on it a little bit on the last episode, since we didn't have a designated space, it was like we had to set up a table. We had to set up chairs. We had to set up mics. We had to do this. The process to set everything up took a lot longer than today, just coming in, sitting down, just checking a couple of things, turning on the lights, and we're good to go. So even that in itself is great because it just helps things feel a lot more smoother, which then allows us to get into the groove of what we're going to talk about and all those other things as well.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny because a few days ago, and I remember, when it happened, I was like, we got to mention this on the podcast. But, I was driving with my wife and, we turned on the radio and, usually radio, whichever radio station you're tuned into, they have songs on rotation, right? So it's kind of like the same songs that you hear over and over again. And unfortunately, sometimes even in like Christian radio, it feels that way, where there's just like the same songs being played over and over again. Songs that I feel like have been playing on the radio for years.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So anyway, there was this one song, and the minute it came on, it was like, wait a minute. Like, this is new. I've never heard this before. And, it's this song called In Jesus' Name by Katy Nichole. And it was interesting because just hearing the song at first, it definitely caught my attention. The lyrics caught my attention. The kind of the intensity of the song as well. And then the chorus and how it says in Jesus' name, that I went and had to look it up. Right. And then, of course, if you're anything like me, you hear a song like that, you go and you look up all the background information, the context, the singer, the author, whatever it is, whoever put this song together. And I was introduced to Katy Nichole. And funny enough, her song, actually this song went viral on TikTok before it was even on Christian radio, before it was a big hit. And it garnered like over 80 million views just on TikTok's platform. So it was something that then a Christian record label actually reached out to her and was like, listen, we need to get this song out there. We need to get this song into the world. But I love it because, again, I think we talk often about the idea of starting where you're at, right? And not worrying or not kind of fiending after having all of the resources and all the things right then and there. Sometimes, if it's recording in your room, that's what you have to do to put things out there for right now, then that's what you have to do. And it was just great to kind of see that testimony and that confirmation, right? And encouragement to kind of like get things started now. But also the idea that something that started off as just something she put on social media is now impacting thousands and thousands, and I would probably say even like, millions of listeners, who are engaging with this song.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because listening to the song and then listening to her talk about the song and just reading up on it, nothing comes easy. Mm-hmm. So even for someone like her, she went through a lot of difficulties, even with her health leading up to this time. She had scoliosis, she had surgeries that she had to kind of endure.
Yeah.
And then in the middle of kind of her own health crisis, COVID happened, and she wrote this song during the pandemic. So it was a lot of things that, seemed to kind of work against her. And even still, she was able to kind of put, pen to paper and pen these words that I think are just amazing.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things where, although it went viral on TikTok, it definitely spread onto all social media platforms. Because I remember months ago, it showed up on my Explorer page, and immediately it was like one of those things that you like repost and like put on your story and all that. Especially because I think that the message behind the song as well connects with people. It was something where, especially for me, I think at that moment, her song is really a prayer for somebody else, honestly. Yeah. She's praying for somebody else's healing, somebody else's liberation, somebody else's, moment to come and stuff like that. So when you yourself are going through something personally, and then you stumble upon a video that is really just a lyric video with her singing, her voice is actually really good.
Yeah.
I actually really like her voice. It's kind of like impactful. Those are the things that when you're strolling on social media and just going down the black hole, that stops you. You usually get stopped by something visually because it looks cool or looks enticing or whatever, or audibly when something like that is just like really strong, because obviously it hits it from the chorus, right where the hook is. So I remember reposting it. I remember seeing everybody else starting to repost it as well. So I can understand why, the Christian producers were savvy about, we need to capitalize on this and like really get you out there to the masses. Because like you said, she hit her thousands on TikTok and her thousands on social media and all that other stuff. But, there is definitely a population of people that aren't on social media, that aren't TikTokers, that aren't Instagrammers, but definitely listen to a K-Love or definitely listen to a Christian radio station. And now this has given her that. It has given her an extended platform to get her song out there.
Yeah, and what I loved about the song too, like you said, it's one thing for you to say things about yourself personally, right? And crying out to God for yourself. But the song is framed as if it were a prayer for the listener or a prayer for a friend. Yeah. And I think that's what garnered my attention, the moment where I think we've all been there, where we are praying intensely for a friend or for a loved one, right? We don't really know what to say. We don't really know, how to go about things. We don't really have a solution, or we don't have answers, but we just have the ability to pray.
Yeah.
Like I've definitely been there where it's like, God, I know this individual needs you. I know, what it's like to be in their shoes, or I know what it's like to be in that position. God, like give them what they need. Just be there for them. And again, there's something powerful when you can come outside of yourself and your own situation to be able to pray for someone else. And that's what immediately caught my attention. And some of the lines in the song, she mentions, I pray for your healing, that circumstances would change. I pray that the fear inside would flee in Jesus' name. I pray that a breakthrough would happen today. I pray miracles over your life in Jesus' name. And it's crazy because just reading it, you're just reading lyrics, right? Mm-hmm. But just, again, the moment and just listening to the song, it's very impactful.
Yeah, it's funny because as I listened to the song before, and then I'm listening to us speak about it, a funny thought comes to my mind, which is, have you ever been put in a situation where someone randomly asks you to pray for them? Or like they call on you randomly to go pray for them or whatever? This is a perfect blueprint on where to start, where you're like, oh my Lord, I don't know what I have to pray for or whatever. So these are like the key points that you pray over for someone. And as you start praying these words over a person, the Holy Spirit then takes over. And then especially if the sermon kicks in and you hear the voice of God telling you to pray on stuff that are specific to their situation, then you're led that way. But sometimes it's not like that. Sometimes it's really like a blanket prayer that person needs, and this is a perfect blueprint for it. So if you're ever put in a situation like that, you're like, oh my Lord, I don't know what to say, start reciting these lyrics and it'll get the job done.
Right. And it's funny that you say that because the song The Blessing comes on. That's another good song to have in your back pocket to just recite lyrics.
Yeah, listen.
But listen, I really liked, her story as well, because it was interesting. She wrote this song before her whole diagnosis with scoliosis, right? So she had this song and she had a surgery.
Yeah.
And following that first surgery, she fell into a depression and was just very down and upset because of her diagnosis and her condition. And they actually said 3 years later, she went through another procedure to kind of like, you know, it was in her spine, the surgery, to like remove the metal rods and screws. And that's where, after that surgery, was where she claims that she really felt God's healing hand upon her life and God's help. So it's just funny how, you know, she could have written a song about herself and could have written a song about crying out to God to help her. And instead, she kind of looked at this opportunity, you know, to pray for somebody else, you know? So again, it's just a reminder to us that our situations and what we go through, we're not going through it for just nothing. We're not going through it just to go through it. There is a reason, you know, behind it all. And, you know, God may be putting something in you to share with other people. It could be through social media. It could be on a bigger platform or in a different way. You know, don't let fear stop you. And don't let the idea that it's not perfect or that you are not finished yet or that you haven't reached that place where you think like, you know, it would be acceptable or that, you know, you feel like you're recognized or qualified. Start where you are with what you have. And I truly believe if God is behind it, then we'll see situations like this where it will take off in its own way. And it will be clear to you, like this was the right move.
Yeah, absolutely. You'll see God's respaldo. You'll see his support in those situations. And, you know, the good thing also is that sometimes we have this fear of, you know, releasing things out into the world because we kind of think it's not perfect yet, or maybe we need to work on it a little bit longer. But sometimes that's what's needed, like that raw, unedited version. Because even with her song, like the song is definitely a little bit different. When you compare the version that went online, that went viral online versus the produced version, you know, it definitely sounds produced. But at the end of the day, it just gives you another opportunity to like tweak it if you want to. But sometimes even that raw, unedited version is exactly what God needs. Sometimes it doesn't have to be squeaky clean. Now, I will say that doesn't mean that now you do the things tirado, where it's kind of like, I'm just going to throw it out there. If it hits, it hits. No. But there are times where we obsess over things, where we don't allow God to allow it to flourish because we're too busy trying to make it perfect. When God is like, don't worry about it, I'll fix it. So you have to, you know, be wise and learn how to discern between those two moments because it's important. Sometimes you do need to hold on to things and work on it. And other times it's kind of like, no, dude, you gotta let it go, let it out into the world, and release it.
Yeah, and I think it just really comes down to intention. You know what I mean? If you're, you know, just doing it just to do it and just to get over it and get through with it, then that's the result you're going to get. That's kind of the fruit of that, you know? But if your intention is pure and you're doing it like, listen, I don't have the best equipment, I don't have the best resources, but I'm going to give it a go, I'm going to try, God honors that.
You know, speaking about intention, there's this thing that has gone, you know, it's like the new lingo for the last couple of years on, you know, how certain people handle relationships or responsibilities. And maybe even certain times on how you feel, which is the terminology of being ghosted. If you had to describe what does it mean to be ghosted, or what does it look like to ghost something or somebody, what would it be?
I think to ghost somebody, it would be to stop talking to them, stop associating with them, with no reason, with no warning, with no preparation or planning. Can I go on? Right? You know, just basically, I think just giving up on someone, walking away from a situation, walking away, you know, from a friendship or relationship.
And I think that more often than not, the term became popular because of dating situations. Where, you know, especially with like the dating apps, you know, Christian Mingle and all those other stuff that are out there, you know, people will start striking conversation with somebody. They will like link up or I don't know how that works. That all came out after my time. I was already married. But, you know, the idea that they link up with people and they start chatting, and then one of the people starts feeling like, yo, we got a groove going on. Like, this person is really interesting. I'm really interested in them. And then all of a sudden they stop responding back. All of a sudden they stop messaging back. They stop answering the text, the calls, all that other stuff. And this person is left there like, what happened? You know, and the idea of being ghosted, I've never technically been, I don't think I've ever been ghosted in a relationship or friendships or anything like that. But I can assume that those people feel confused. They're like, what happened? I thought we were like really jiving. They made me feel self-conscious.
Yeah.
Did I do something? Did I make a mistake? Did I offend the person? Was my breath smelling? Maybe they went on a date. I don't know what the situation was. So they become self-conscious, they become embarrassed, and it also affects their self-esteem as well, especially in the dating world, I would think, because if you're constantly getting ghosted, then it's the idea of, oh snap, I'm the problem. What's wrong with me? But aside from the situation being a thing on relationships in reference to like dating, I think that friendships can get ghosted as well.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people ghost classes in college. They just stop going for no reason. Nobody knows why. They just stop going.
We see people ghost church.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah,
It'd be like, it's been like 3-4 weeks.
Yeah, I was like, yo, she was doing laps last Sunday around the church, and now all of a sudden she's not here. What's going on?
We need to get those sound effects, like the bomb drop. We need to get that.
Imagine. No. But anyway, so then I think, is there a way to maneuver ghosting in a positive way? Is ghosting itself good, or do things need to be handled like straightforward, clear, and concise?
Yeah, I think ghosting is not okay, right? I don't want to use the word never, right? Because again, I'm sure someone can find a certain scenario, situation where it's like, you have to do that, right?
Yeah.
But I think, looking at it, especially from like, let's say just a friendship, perspective, I don't think it's okay. And I think there are also different levels to ghosting, right? There's the ghosting where you completely walk away with no type of response, nothing, just done. And then there's the ghosting, like a temporary ghost, you know what I mean? Where it's like 3-4 days, a week, 2 weeks, a month. And then they come back and for whatever reason, they, tell you what the situation was or what they were going through or what they felt, right? So I think each level and each scenario is different and requires a different response or a different reaction. But I think in general, the idea of ghosting, in my opinion, when someone ghosts an individual, a friendship or in a relationship, I think it's a way to get out of a situation without addressing the problem or addressing your feelings. At times, it doesn't have to be a problem. It could just be something that you're feeling in that moment that you're choosing not to address with that person, right? And I think it's easier in people's minds sometimes to ghost someone, to just drop them and walk away, than it is to actually go through the process of talking things out and going through the process of trying to clear the air. Right? In my opinion, I think it's worse to ghost someone because I think it takes more work. Right? I think it takes work to, try to get the other person to talk to you. Like, why? Like, what happened? Waiting for a response back, like that lag time of waiting and just, it's been a week, it's been 2 weeks. I don't know this, and they're not talking to me. They're not saying anything. They're not answering my messages. Right? I think there's more of an emotional toll when you ghost someone, right? Or when you're ghosted than if you chose to sit and have a conversation and go through with it. At least by the end of the conversation, the hope is either we're moving forward or for whatever reason we're not, and we're clear on that.
Yeah, and I think that proximity dictates the level of difficulty for ghosting, because if it's someone who you live in New York, they live in California, you kind of like online buddies, you just block them on all platforms and you're pretty much set. But if it's someone who's in your circle, someone who's in your church, or someone who's at your job or something, then it's a lot more difficult because you physically have to like bob and weave them. So it's kind of like the service ended, you're intentionally like trying to like jet before the person comes to speak to you. So there is a lot of work that goes into it. And I think that the reason why, and it's like you were saying, the reason why people ghost people or situations in general is because they don't want to face the music. They don't want to have the difficult conversations of, listen, if it's in a relationship situation, I'm not really feeling you. I'm not really vibing with you that way, and I just think that we're better off going separate ways. They think it's better to just leave them ghosted. And I think that friendships, I don't think that's something that people speak on about a lot. The idea of how to handle friendship breakups, that's something that is difficult because especially if you've invested many years or months or time with these people to then be like, yeah, I don't think we're going down the same path anymore. So deuces. I think it's easier for people to do the gradual ghosting, which is that, maybe they used to, whenever somebody texted them, they would answer them right away. So then it goes from right away to a couple of hours, to a couple of days, to a couple of weeks, to a couple of months, and then they gradually get ghosted. All because they don't want to have that conversation with why they feel that match no longer works. Yeah.
And I think in a process of a gradual ghost, right, we'll call it that, I think it's also the other person picks up on it, right? So if I'm the friend being ghosted gradually, I should be able to have picked up by week 2 or week 3.
Yeah, something's up.
Something's up. You know what I mean? So it's also the responsibility of that person to have a conversation and follow up. You know what I mean? And let me tell you, any conversation on that level that you have with anybody, a friend, a spouse, or whatever, you know what I mean, in regards to like what's going on between us, what's happening is not easy.
Yeah.
So I think that, again, that is why it seems better to just drop everything and walk away from a situation.
Yeah.
It is very hard to confront something that is uncomfortable or confront something that you don't want to speak on or speak about. You know what I mean? And it does take a lot of courage and boldness to kind of do that. But again, it's like we could either sit and have this conversation and go through kind of, you know, the reworking of what our friendship will be, or we can just ghost each other. You can ghost me, or, you know, and then it's like a whole different, you know, level of consequences and side effects from that situation.
No, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
And I think that, you know, one of the things also, you know, we speak, it's our name, God, Life, Culture. You know, we spoke about the life and culture part of it. And I think that as Christians as well, we go through moments in our life where maybe we feel ghosted by God, where, you know, you may be going through a situation and it's like taking a long minute for it to resolve itself. Maybe you're waiting on a certain blessing and it's like nowhere to be seen. And
listen, don't rush to that point. If you're listening, have you ever felt ghosted by God? If you're watching us, have you ever felt ghosted by God? And I love that idea because I think at one point or another, we all feel like we have been.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
Whether it's like not in God's nature to just abandon us.
Yeah.
As Christian as you are and as holy as you want to be, there are moments where you feel like you are out here all by yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember a couple of years ago, I was going through a situation where I think I abandoned was more like the word that I think a lot more people would navigate or gravitate to, because ghosting is like the new trendier thing. But the idea of feeling like you're in the ocean swimming and you barely have a life jacket on or something like that, you know, those are situations we've all been in and felt, you know, abandoned, or like God is ghosting us, even in the simplicity of, you know, the process you're going through is a process that's taken a year. You know, God spoke to you a year ago, but it's been 9 months, it's been 10 months, it's been 11 months. You haven't heard anything from God. You haven't felt anything in reference to this. You know, everything is still, the life is still moving forward. So it's not like when you go through processes in life that everything stops for you to figure it out and then you get to jump back into life. No, life continues to move around you. So it's like, how do I navigate moving around in life while feeling like God has ghosted me?
Yeah. And I think that's like the big question. How do we do that? You know, because I think at one point or another, like I said, you will find yourself in a place where you know all of the right things. You know what you should do. You know that God is there, and you know that he sees, and you know that he's promised things. And I think even still, right, sometimes the feelings get the best of us. Our feelings take over, and we feel like, God, you said all these things, but where are you? You know what I mean? True. Life events and life experiences don't seem to match up to what he said. You know what I mean? And it's funny because even in moments where I have felt, let's say that God has ghosted me, or moments where I felt like God is not being as clear as I want him to be, or being as, you know, specific as I want him to be, you know, there's something inside that doesn't allow myself to really accept that thought. Yeah. You know? So I think that's where the hope in Christians and the hope in believers rise, where, you know, we may feel this way. We may feel like, God, have you ghosted me? God, have you left me? God, I feel alone. But deep down inside, that thought, you don't really accept it, and you don't really live and believe and breathe it. You know what I mean? Because there is something deep down inside that has a hope that things will get better. God is there. You know what I mean? So it's like moments where difficult situations have happened, and moments where it's like, God, really, now this has to happen? Like, or, you know, and you just get so upset and you're so distraught and there's no clear answers, and you really don't see like a clear purpose as to why is this happening to me? Deep down on the inside, I believe, you know, you may have to search and you may have to dig for it, but there is still a hope that God does not ghost us. That God does not leave us. That God does not let you fend for yourself and let you drown in your situation and just, sit by the sidelines to just watch you implode and be destroyed. I don't believe that that's in God's nature or character to abandon, to leave you, and to ghost you.
Yeah, unpurposefully. Because then, I think of like people in the Bible who maybe have went through experiences, or that could be like, I'm like the poster boy for feeling ghosted. And I think of like Job. Job was someone who was living an amazing life, had many great things, had a family, had this, had that, was the richest man at the time. And then all of a sudden, God has a conversation without him, about him, and he's put into a situation where he loses everything. And I think that Job is one of those people that you can look at in the Bible that although he was suffering, although he was hurting, although life around him was moving forward in a way that wasn't the most pleasant, we see that, like you said, he had this little bit of hope. He had this thing that he held on to that did not allow him to completely like give everything up and to completely be like, you know what, you did abandon me. You did ghost me. You're so unfair. You're so messed up. These are all things that at many times we have thought of as humans. Where we have those moments, even though we're holding on to God's word, even though we're like, Lord, I'm not going to give up, but I do express that I feel this way, but Job in the Bible, we see that he held on, whether he only had an ounce of hope left, whether it was the size of a mustard seed, it really doesn't matter. The point is that it was enough to get him through to the other side.
And I think it's important, and I mentioned this on one of our previous podcasts not too long ago, but the idea of being in your feelings, right? And I think a lot of times, as Christians, it's easy to bypass feelings because we're so used to,
the crazy faith.
The crazy faith. We're so used to walking by faith that, these feelings that I'm feeling right now, like I can't be feeling them. So I have to believe and trust in God and all of those things, where I think the difference is you can be in your feelings. You just can't stay in your feelings. Right. And you have to bring your feelings to God. So it's like the idea of you can be in your feelings and feel all of those things, and that's okay. But at some point, you have to bring that to him.
Yeah.
You have to bring that to him. And I think, that idea, even Job's story, where it was like he went through everything imaginable, the hardships that you don't ever want to go through. He went through it and felt all of the feelings. You know what I mean? And even when people around him were telling him to just curse God and die and all these things, he chose not to. And again, it was like that little bit of hope that he had inside of him. And I think it's important for us to recognize our feelings, recognize the emotional distress you may be going through, or the feelings of abandonment or just feeling alone. But that little bit of hope that we have inside, doing everything possible to not let it die.
Yeah.
Right? How can you let that little bit of faith that you have left, that little bit of hope, the little bit of light at the end of the tunnel that you barely see, how could you keep that alive?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that is where we see many Christians and many believers at times who just decide to walk away. Or we may notice and pick up on things like, something's happening there where it seems like they're not, who they used to be, or not believing what they used to believe. And it's that little bit of hope in life's toughest situations and life's moments of difficulty that you don't pay attention to. And you just kind of let it die.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to remember, there are times where we're like expecting, like we're waiting on a word, or we're waiting on a promise, or we're waiting on a blessing, and we're waiting for it to unfold in a specific way. We've made up this completely like fantasy version of how we want everything to unfold. And when it doesn't happen that way, we kind of we block out all the other possibilities.
Yeah.
And we see this in the simple stuff of like, we're praying to God for something, and we're like, Lord, we really want that the lady that wears her bun a certain way, let her be the one to speak to me on this. Where there are times that God will use the lady with the bun to come and minister to you about the situation. But there's other ways that God is speaking to you through different avenues, through different facets. And we have to, in those moments where you feel like you're holding onto a grain of mustard seed as your hope, you have to be open to all the different ways in which God can speak to you, whether it's audibly, whether it's in your prayer, whether it's reading the word, whether it's just sitting down in the middle of a worship session, whether it's during a preaching, whether it is the most randomest thing. There's especially for people that have been serving God for a really long time, we've heard many messages.
Yeah.
We've heard many preachings. We've seen many situations happen. And God has also spoken to us for many times throughout the years that we forget about. And sometimes you just need to sit down and reflect. And then all of a sudden, you'll get this random flashback about one time in 2007 where you were at a youth event and you received a word from God. And that alone is good enough to get you to the next day. But if you're not open to reflecting, if you're not open to being like, Lord, I need you to speak to me however you want to do it, just do it, then you wind up being closed-minded and you wind up closing out God's voice from speaking to you.
And I think it's important to be, like you said, open-minded, also to where God may be pushing you to, right? Or leading you to. Because I think oftentimes we don't hear from God the way we want him to. So in our minds, we're like, God is ghosting me right now. He's ghosted me. And we don't realize, well, in this discomfort that you're in and in this kind of confusion or in this state of not knowing exactly what to do, you know, what are things that are being open and available to you? What are things that, you know, God may be introducing to you to kind of take a step into that you're just here sitting back waiting for God to come through the way you wanted him to, but God is opening different doors or trying to lead you down a different path, but you're so stuck on what you wanted or stuck on how you wanted it that you're missing out on everything else that God has for you, missing out on ultimately God's journey of bringing you to that place of what you want, let's say. You know what I mean? Because there could be things that, you know what, you want, and that's exactly what God wants to give you. It's just not going to be in the way you thought. So it's like, ultimately, the destination is the same. The journey is different. Do you trust God's journey to bring you to that destination? You know, do you trust his path to bring you there? And, you know, I think we're all guilty of that, right? Wanting it to be a certain way, wanting it to look a certain way. And when it's not that, it's easy to feel like God's ghosted us.
Yeah, and I think that, listen, you know, there's a lot of scripture in the Bible that speaks about, you know, feelings of abandonment. Like, what do you do with those feelings? You know, Joshua 1:9 says, I've commanded you, haven't I? Be strong and courageous. Don't be fearful or discouraged, because the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. So even when you feel like he's not with you, he really is. You know, Deuteronomy 31:6 says, the Lord your God who goes with you, he will not leave you or abandon you. You know, and a lot of times I think that, especially for a seasoned Christians, you know, those Bible verses at the moment, it's kind of like, I already heard that. Leave me alone. I don't want to hear that again. But it's kind of like you have to let it like marinate in your heart. Let it marinate in your mind. Let it marinate in your heart. And you'll see that it'll start to chip away at those feelings of abandonment, at those feelings of feeling ghosted, that anger that rises up because of that as well. Yeah.
And it's funny because I like hear our listeners and people watching asking, but what do I do if someone's ghosted me? Right.
Oh, okay.
So we're talking about God ghosting us. So we know that he don't do that. Right. And a lot of times it's us and our perception. But now God is not like people, and people are not God. So if someone is in a friendship or in a relationship where they feel like someone's ghosted them and they actually cared for that person and loved that person and, you know, they were close to them, how do they handle that? What do you think can be done if you're in a situation where you have been ghosted and you've just been left there?
I think the realization is that you make the attempt. You try to reach out. You be like, hey, so-and-so, I really want to speak with you. Maybe you bump into them somewhere, but like, hey, I really want to talk to you. You know, I just feel like you've been acting really weird with me. But you really have to come to the realization of one or two things is going to happen. One of three things. Number one, they'll be honest and say, listen, it's X, Y, and Z. Number two, they'll lie up the wazoo and be like, no, we're good. Let's go. You know what? Tomorrow, let's meet up for coffee. And then they will meet up with you.
Right.
And then three, you have to be prepared for them to be like, I just don't want to talk to you anymore.
Yeah.
And just leave it at that. And it's difficult because you don't know which scenario you're going to get.
It's true.
You know, so it's kind of like you have the choice of being like, you know what? I feel ghosted and I'm just going to leave it alone. They ghosted me. It's their loss. Because I'm an amazing person. That's the way I would think. I'm an amazing person. It's their loss because they ghosted me, so I'm just going to let it be. Or if you want to confront them and speak to them about it, then you have to be ready to take in whatever is thrown at you, whether it's the truth, which may be good or may be hurtful as well, whether it's a lie that just leaves you with more questions, or the possibility they just be like, I don't want to talk to you about it. It is what it is. Just go your separate way.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think an attempt needs to be made. I think for your sake, and even sometimes their sake, but at least for your sake, to know that you tried.
Yeah.
You tried to fix, you tried to restore, amend, you tried to have a conversation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And ultimately, if, you know, because in my mind, an individual who ghosts someone, you wouldn't even get the first, second, or third attempt. You know what I mean? Or option, because they're just not talking to you. You know what I mean? So for the individual who's just stuck with a friend who's ghosted them and left them with no explanation and no follow-up, you know what I mean? I think after an attempt has been made and it just has not been successful for whatever reason, I think that's where you have to come to terms and really, again, it's like having that relationship with God to be able to have him help you let go of that.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Where you're not carrying that into other friendships and other relationships and other, blessings that God has for you. I think the worst thing that could happen is for you to go through a situation like this and allow it to affect you so much where then you're closed off from that point on, and you miss out again on other opportunities or other blessings that God has for you because of an individual who was not brave enough to confront the problem. Yeah. You know what I mean? Or coward enough, right, to just walk away and not deal with it.
Yeah, randomly, I did think of a scenario where you may need to ghost someone. And I think that there are friendships or even relationships where the person is just toxic. The person is just not getting it. They're not good for you mentally. They're not good for you spiritually. They're not good for you, whatever it is. And even though you've asked them, hey, I need a little bit of space. Hey, you're trying to like build that space and that barrier. They come in like a wrecking ball, a la Miley Cyrus, and they don't get it. They don't get that you're trying to like build, even though you've spoken with them, even though you've done the right thing to be like, I need some separation. Sometimes after that conversation is had, you do need to block them. Right. You do need to like separate yourself, be obvious about it. It comes off grimy a little bit when you're like purposely like, I'm not talking to you, and you just keep it moving. And we see this in like relationships. How many people haven't gotten into a relationship and they have like a crazy ex-girlfriend or crazy ex-boyfriend, which is like this person that won't leave them alone. You need a restraining order, maybe, but it's okay in those situations to like, and maybe it's not considered ghosting. That person may feel like you're ghosting. They're like, oh, I thought we talked about it. But there are scenarios. So like you said at the top of the hour, there may be situations where that is that is what you have to do. But 9 times out of 10, that's not the situation. Not everyone has a crazy person that's trying to be their friend. And
even when you have to make that hard decision to let someone go and kind of cut them off like that, there's a way to do that.
Yes.
And again, I'm sure people can think of crazy scenarios where it's like, they don't deserve that. They did this, they did that, right? But, for the standard and like, kind of normal situation, the generic situation, a conversation should be had, and that can be handled the right way. Yeah. Because again, it's all about perspective and perception. Yeah. Someone may think, well, you deserve to be cut off, and the other person would be like, are you kidding me? What did I do to deserve for you to, treat me that way or feel that way? Yeah. And it's like, no, a conversation needs to be had. I just can't ultimately decide, nope, you're toxic for me. Yeah. You know what I mean? But again, anything that kind of disrupts your peace and your mental health and your relationship with God and your peace within yourself and other people and all those things, it needs to be evaluated, checked, reflected on, and you may have to not necessarily ghost, but, cut off or distance and put space between you and that other person, you and that, group of people, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, in summary, don't be a ghoster. Put your big boy pants on or your big girl pants on and have those tough conversations. Speak to the people that you need to speak with. Just be clear, concise, to the point. It doesn't need to be a 4-hour conversation. Sometimes it's like, here are my 3 points. This is the reason why I think that this relationship or this friendship needs to end. You give them an opportunity to speak. They may convince you otherwise. They may be like, you know what, I'll change and, we could work on it. But if there's no going back, then at least you did your part and letting them know respectfully. That's the other thing. Respectfully. Don't go over there, acting crazy. Right. And just handle it that way. That's the grown thing to do. And I think that's the right thing to do. Yes. To be like, you know what? It may hurt. It may be difficult. But be like, listen, so that there isn't any speculation on why this ended. And you're not walking around with like this wound that I didn't mean to give you. This is the reason. Yeah. And I'm sorry it went that way, but this is what I need at the moment. Maybe in the future, if you want to throw that out there, sometimes you don't want to. If in the future, maybe we can reconnect, we will. But at the moment, I don't need it.
And like I said, you have to be prepared because that is hard. Yeah. That is a very difficult conversation to have. And you just have to be ready for it. And also having the hope that God does not ghost us, right? And having the confidence that although it may feel like he's not there, may feel like he's not watching, may feel like he's not aware, he is very aware. Yes. He is not like your friend that left you. He is not like that boyfriend or girlfriend that just dumped you and left you with no explanation. He is God and he does not ghost us.
Yeah, so don't ghost him. Wait it out.
Mic drop, yes.
You know what I mean? Like, don't dent and turn.
We
like,
didn't even hit that point.
We did it. That's for next week's episode.
Right.
But yeah, at times we feel like God has ghosted us, so we decide to ghost him. It's like, no, tough it out. Hold on. He, like you said, is not human. He's not like everybody else. There's a reason and a purpose for everything. So wait it out. Yeah.
Listen, I'm going to have to go back and listen to this episode and just let what we said marinate for myself. No, but definitely. And we hope that all of you listening have been blessed and encouraged by this. Again, we speak on things that, it's not like we're just so far removed from these topics, right? No. And these ideas, ultimately we're in it with you, and we're all in this kind of, we're all in this together. Yes, exactly. That's what I think of. But if you are, watching us on YouTube again, we want you to hit that subscribe button, like, share, do all of that. If you're listening to us on Apple, subscribe as well. Those of you who don't know, on Spotify now, you can see the video and the visual on there as well. So definitely we are excited for all of the new changes and all the new visuals and everything that we have coming up. Be sure to stay connected because we have some special guests that will be joining us, within the next few episodes. So definitely it's something that you want to be on the lookout for.
Yeah, so thank you once again for tuning into the latest episode of the God Life Culture podcast. That's God Life Culture. Until next time.
See ya.
Bye.